Howdy, folks. Today we're diving into the deep end, quite literally, because we're talking underwater photography, creative business, and how building a podcast can elevate your brand as an artist. It's going to be bold, inspiring, and full of takeaways for any photographer looking to push their work further right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nuts, and before we get started, I've got one thing to ask of you. Turns out that over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners on audio are not actually subscribed to the channel. Come on, folks, let's change that. Just hit that subscribe button. It helps me get even more cool guests on the show, although I don't know if that's even still possible. Anyway, one click, that is all it takes. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, let's welcome today's special guest, underwater photographer, podcaster, creative brand builder, and all-round powerhouse. Give it up for Jean Carlo Peñaloza. Jean, how's it going, man?
It's going great. How are you?
I am very well. I'm so glad to finally have you on the show. We've tried to make it happen for a while, and it is happening.
Absolutely. I'm going to nitpick a little bit because I do this with everybody. So my name is Jean Carlo.
Oh, right. Okay, Jean Carlo. Cool. It's the French pronunciation. Perfect.
I know, but it never translated well here in the U.S. Like, I can't tell you. Turns out that Jean in the U.S. is an older female name. And it hasn't really been used since like the 50s or 60s. So every time somebody sees my name, it's like, oh, Jean. So yeah. It's all good.
I feel that completely because nobody ever gets my name wrong, right, even.
Oh my God, how many times did I screw it up at imaging? I'm like, cursed, how do I say it?
So the thing is, this is the history of my name right there. In English-speaking countries, people call me Kirsten, or they call me Kay. Actually, most people call me Kay. The reason for that is that actually originally in Germany, where I hail from originally, my name is pronounced Kersten. But the problem is there are lots of derivatives of that name that are very similar, like Kerstin or Kirsten or Karsten with a C and with a K. And also, there's so many different variations. It's unreal. But as it so happens, my name is extremely rare. And it's very often used as a surname. And my surname, Lutz, is sometimes used as a first name, but also occurs as a surname, only it's usually spelled with a Z. So you see the confusion. So nobody ever gets my name right. And so in the 90s, there used to be a TV show, which was basically a little bit like, Crime Watch, one of these shows where they show some cases of some crimes that have been committed, and then they put a call out to the general public to, for hints and clues and whatever, right? For people to call in. It's that kind of show. And it was called K, Crime on Target. That was just the name of the show. I don't know why. And so my friends started calling me K, which is the German letter K, which then translated into K in English. Only turns out that the name K is also a female name in English. So there we go. So I've actually just given up.
So what you do is you just open up a podcast, in retaliation to it.
Yes, totally in retaliation. That's the thing. It's my mom calls me Kay. So not even my mom uses my full name.
Oh my God.
It's just, there's one of these things, man.
There's a whole funny story with my mom because for the longest time, I've been told, oh, your name is Jean Carlo, but my mom calls me Jean Carlos. She says, no, I named you Jean Carlos. I had to go and find my birth certificate to tell my mom, like, no, look, it's here. It is handwritten, Jean Carlo. And she's like, so I've been calling you Jean Carlos all this time? And I'm like, yeah, it's been pronounced wrong. He's like, I could have sworn I did. They must have had a typo. I'm like, that's probably the case, Mom. That's probably the case.
This is like, it's like, what does that make you feel as a son, but not even your parents get it right? This is terrible. Oh man. Anyway, I'm glad we got that out of our system. Awesome. Man, underwater photography. Tell me about that, because I don't think, if I remember correctly, in 260 episodes of this podcast, I don't think I've ever talked about underwater photography. Super interesting.
Underwater photography. So the facet of underwater photography that I like to do is portraiture, which carries its own level of challenges. And there's some phenomenal photographers out there that do this. You have Brett Stanley, who's a great guy, great educator. I forgot her name, from Water Bear Photography. But for me, I started doing underwater photography right before the pandemic, and trial and error. There was not a lot of resources back then. If they were, I did not find them. I like the challenge of, I don't know, maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment, but how can I replicate what I see on my studio underwater? Now, when you're underwater, you have to think of some things that you come to learn. One of them is there's no radio frequencies traveling underwater. There's no Bluetooth that works underwater. So you can't set off a strobe. You can bring lights, right? You can bring lights. But of course, why would I do that? That's the easy way. I'm like, how can I set off strobes underwater? And I have to go down this rabbit hole of what are the marine photographers doing? What are they using? They have the little camera body with the things attached and everything. And that was one way that I tried. But I also am not the strongest swimmer. So
I'm going for an underwater photographer. That's like a drawback.
So I'm like, all right, I got a couple of things working against me, and started by holding my breath, had like a cheap little Sea Frogs camera housing, which worked, but comes to this risk. You are putting your expensive mirrorless or DSLR camera underwater, your lenses and whatnot. If water gets in there, there goes your camera. And I tell you what, it's serene. That's what sold me on it, Kirsten. It's the fact that it is the only place outside of, I used to do wind tunnel skydiving as well for a while. It's the only place that I can only focus on what I'm doing at the moment. If I'm not underwater, I'm thinking about all the 100 things, whether it's the podcast, the photo, my family, my dog, everything. When you're underwater, first of all, you have to make sure that you're breathing correctly and you're doing all those mechanics. And then when you're underwater taking photos of someone, you have to be even more hyper-focused to make sure that you're getting a lot of great shots, because you'll take 100 photos, but only get maybe 5 or 10 good ones at the end. It's just very serene. It just makes me, it puts me in that very narrow path to make sure that I can finish what I'm trying to do. And it's like a little hiatus. I haven't done it in a couple of years though. That's my personal projects are underwater photography, but I've been too busy doing headshots and other kinds of portraitures above ground.
That's often the case. I mean, that's why I always preach the importance of personal projects. It's because it just take you out of that daily grind, and it really it's like a magic wand for personal creative development.
Absolutely, absolutely. When I was at imaging, I was starting to ask people that question. I don't know where it started, who it was with, but then I started asking every single individual. Some of them do personal projects all the time, and it's part of they make sure they do work and they do personal project. They found a balance. Others have not touched the camera outside of the studio in like over a decade plus. And you can see it in their face, how they're like, wow, man, it's been like that long since I've actually just photographed for fun versus photographed for a client or for work. And it just further narrow down the importance that I need to get back into that, because not only do I have all the gear, I mean, we spend so much money on gear, but it's just, you got to do it, because otherwise I think you get to a stalemate and then you feel like all you're doing is just pumping out client work. And I guess right now my alternative has been this podcast. This is my new creative project, which is trying to understand all the inner workings of putting together a podcast. I mean, your intro and everything else, I was dancing to it. It's cool, man. It's actually cool to see another fellow podcaster and see how they do things and how they incorporate things. It's pretty neat, man. It's been a great journey so far.
Yeah, I bet you. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I've learned so much from, getting to know people like Steve Brazel, for instance, from Behind the Shot, and a variety of other podcasters in this photo. Well, actually in the photo podcasting world, but really in the podcasting world, more general. It is super interesting. I wouldn't be using this system had it not been for me getting to know other people in this arena, who then, because because you have these conversations, you learn from it, and you kind of, you think, oh, well, this might actually work much better for me, and that's how you progress. That's the thing, and things change over like the course of, I mean, in this case, of like 260 something, episodes, things have changed dramatically, over time, and they will always be changing. It's like it's something that's in a state of flux.
100%. I'll tell you what, a good example, right? The little behind the scenes, and I'm sure you probably have it too. Little change is I used to do this, where I would have the person on the camera here, and then sometimes do this. Now, after I don't know how many episodes, I'm like, you know what? It's important for the viewer, it's important for the person to have a little teleprompter. But I didn't start that way. You just have to start. And I think starting, regardless of how you do it, whether it's a webcam, your phone, and etc., if it's something that interests people, I think they should do it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of the times it's just a lot of work goes behind the scenes. I don't know what kind of work goes behind your scenes, but it's still just one person in my case that's doing everything. And while you're juggling family life and work and etc., it's not for the faint of heart. So I admire the people that have been doing this long term, because I'm sure they've come across a lot of the issues that happen along the way, like forgetting to press record. I chuckled when they say it's important to press record. I'm like, yes, it is. I've had to put things in place to prevent me from making those mistakes again, because it has happened. And it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing as a professional to not deliver.
Yeah. Well, yes, and stuff like that happens all the time. I mean, the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that people don't see, when they consume an episode like this. Of course, there's always something happening, and so I challenge anybody, who maybe if you're a consummate listener of this podcast, I challenge you to go back through past episodes on YouTube and just figure out when these lights behind me are on and when they're off. When they're off, I've usually forgotten to turn them on, and this is like, it's one of these things. I make that mistake all the time, and it's just what it is. But ultimately, I think when, and I've forgotten to press record at the beginning, several times. But I think when you end up creating an interesting conversation, people are very forgiving in the end, because actually they had a good experience, and I think that's the important part. But there's always stuff that goes wrong behind the scenes. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. There's so many moving parts in making this happen that something's bound to go wrong.
Yeah. No, even in these settings, right? Something can go wrong. You've seen me at expos. It's like amplifying it of now you have all these different mechanics, and my goal was to go live. That didn't happen because the internet was garbage. It was like 1.5 megabits per second. I'm like, well, there goes that idea. And then you have to be nimble enough to be, just to adapt. And I've come to realize that, at least from my perspective, from my show, people love the mistakes. They tell me verbally, like, I actually like the fact that you leave the mistakes and whatnot, because it just feels like it's okay to make a mistake. And I think it is. I think it's okay to give permission to people to make mistakes, figure it out as you go along. And as long as you're transparent about it, like, for example, Peter Hurley, his interview that I had at Imaging, the focus kept pulling. It would be focused on him. It'll be focused on the background where Iboto was. And it's all because of the fact that he was going live and he put his phone in front of the camera, and then the camera locked right at the corner of his phone for most of the episode. And I just told him, I said, look, this is what happened. I'm really sorry. He's like, hey, that's fine, man. Just, we have the audio. We have this. It was a great conversation. Just post it. And I posted even with the out of focus video, because I think we went from a generation that focused on perfection, that focused on hiding the lapel mic, hiding all these different things that had to be almost Hollywood quality, to now the microphone shows up. It's drastically different.
Absolutely, and it's part of this, stylistically. It's part of the whole thing. If you go onto YouTube and you check out X amount of different podcasts, you virtually always see the mic in the shot. There are people who are maybe of an older generation that I've spoken to in the past who cringe every time they see that, not really realizing that this is just like it's like a fashion thing, but it's also it's a sort of it's a matter of simplicity. in a way, because, what it boils down to is ultimately the conversation, the content, because it's all content driven. So, whether, to me anyway, whether I cut out every filler word or every gap or pause, or whether I just let the conversation roll and leave all these things in, that's just ultimately it's a stylistic choice. And so I think when you create something like a podcast like this, you just make a decision as to how what the overarching style is. Do you want it to be like super polished and mega slick and mega professional? Okay, great. You're probably going to have to rent a studio or a hotel room or something like that to set it up. And you probably need crew and multiple cameras and all that kind of stuff. And, I've been there. Like I had at one point, we had a 3-camera setup and 7 lights or whatever. And then you very quickly find that you spend more time setting the whole thing up and breaking it down rather than actually having the conversation. And the trick is what I found. It's my personal secret. But, this is the thing I found. Is that the key? The devil is not in the detail. The key is in the simplicity, because the more obstacles you take out of the equation, the more likely you're going to be consistent over time, And I think the key with anything like this is just consistency, just showing up, every Thursday. Or in my case, every Thursday, whatever the sequence is that, might be fortnightly, it might be once a month, it might be every week, it might be every day for some people, but I think that's the overarching rule for me, is that there's an episode every Thursday and that is how it is, and there'll be something, and it might not be the best thing since sliced bread, but that's fine. That's absolutely fine.
It's an interesting thing, right? Podcasting, because you're right about the simplicity. It's interesting. I'm probably going to be at 60 something episodes soon. And from the very first ones to now, I've tried to find ways. I'm like, oh, how can I have a 2-camera angle, right? How can I do this? I'm on the go more times than not.
Yeah.
And with that, it adds a level of complexity. I'm like, okay, so how am I going to set 2 cameras? I'm a solo creator. I've just given up on it. That was after, I think it was after Shutterfest. I'm like, I'm done. Like, I think I'm just going to do 1 camera, keep it simple. And it's 4K, so I can always, crop in, crop out if I want to. And with every single one, it's like, how can I make it simpler and simpler and simpler? Because eventually I would like people to hopefully get out there and do something. Because these videos, how many episodes do you have, Kirsten, so far, you said?
Is this 260 something?
Think of it this way, right? You have 260 instances of you leaving behind a part of yourself as a legacy. Unless the internet goes out and all content gets deleted, which could happen, right? And it's not impossible. But we are leaving behind something that, whether it's for our family, our friends, or whatever it might be, a random stranger, that can always go back and see what it is that we thought, what it is, how we talked, how we treated people, and etc. And that's, to me, one of the powers of this whole thing, man. It's a lot of work, but at the end, it's worth it. And it gives you the flexibility to not be, at least for me, not the perfectionist that I try to be when I take photos. Because when I'm in the studio, like, I have to, light meter everything. Everything has to fall. The light has to fall exactly how I wanted. Everything has to look a certain way. Podcasting has allowed me to kind of relinquish that control a little bit and just say, you know what? Simple edit, mistakes will be left in. I just want to make sure my audio is good, the footage is good, and the conversation, to your point, is the most critical part, because it should be. It should be about the conversation. So yeah, focus on your audio, people. More so on your audio than your video in this case.
Was that difficult for you to leave that perfectionism behind?
Surprisingly, no. I think it's because I didn't have time. I'm a fairly busy individual, and I just had to. Maybe it's because of the age that I'm getting to right now. I said, you know what? Nah, I don't have time. So this will be good enough. And then after hearing from people that they actually liked how organic and raw it felt, but still was professional, it just sold me on the idea that, oh, yep, I am going to stick with that. I'm going to leave mistakes. If I forget to do an intro, I'll try to throw it in there. And it works. It works. And sometimes I've forgotten to do an intro and I'll call myself out and say, yeah, totally forgot to introduce my guest. So I don't know, man. It's an interesting little journey. I'm 2 years in. So
Yeah.
I'm an infant.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. Well, I mean, it's people tend to forget this sometimes, is that especially with, podcasts like these and, like the Outspoken Artist, these are one-person productions. There isn't a team behind it. Like, when you look at some of the big players in this field, like the Joe Rogans or the Diary of a CEO and all that kind of stuff, these sort of productions, they're productions. There's a team behind it. With the Diary of a CEO, I think there's 16 people working on a show. That's as far as I remember. Like, there's a backroom team. There's a guy whose job it is to create the titles. That's a full-time job.
Yeah.
It's, these kind of podcasts are not like that. They are not made on a budget. I mean, they're made on a budget, basically, on a budget of zero, basically, and that's the thing. But on the flip side, it is amazing that the technology even exists, that, something like this can be done and can be broadcast to the wider world. It just needs people who are willing to do it. And, like yourself, and me and many other podcasters in general and in the photography world as well, it's dedication. And I think, do you know that the average lifespan of a podcast is 7 episodes?
Really?
Yeah, statistically speaking, the average podcast survives for 7 episodes. So, by the time you make it to 8, you've already beaten the average, right? So, and the reason why that is I think it's because it is a lot of work and it is a lot of effort. And if you want to be consistent, you have to put that effort in every week or whatever, every fortnight or whatever.
Right.
And people just don't realize that to start with, and then very quickly get a little reality shock, and then the enthusiasm and there's no payback. That's the other thing. It's not like you put an episode out and the world goes, "Whoa, we've just been waiting for this," It's like it's awesome. Where has this been? It's not like that. You make episode after episode after episode. Nobody listens. And that's the reality of it.
Not in the beginning. Nobody's really paying attention because that's just the way it is. There's so many podcasts out there, so many video being put out on the internet. And I get this question from different people. Maybe they don't understand this sometimes, and I try to explain it. Have you monetized your podcast? I said, here's the thing. Monetization is great, but you have to think about, why are you doing the podcast and what is of value to you? Is it a monetary dollar sign that considers, will make you consider your podcast to be successful? Or is there something else that could be giving you value from your efforts, right? In this case, the not spoken about value about podcasting is the connections that you make. First of all, you also are getting better at talking to people and interacting with people. And the more you do it, the better you're going to get. There's a value right there. People pay money to be able to do that. But the networking, the connections, the opportunities that come from this, I've gotten more opportunities outside of my regional area because of the people that I talk to, opportunities to now start speaking, which is pretty cool because it's always been something I'm interested in. Just never thought I could get there. And I did. It's pretty cool. It's pretty neat to give back to people and to see them kind of, some of them it clicks. They're like, oh, okay. But then hoping that not only does it click, but you're like, are you going to actually move forward with it? Because not everybody does. Maybe a lot of them fall into that 7-episode category. So I feel that these podcasts give you value in many different ways. It just depends on what that is to you. And I'm curious for you, after all this effort you put in, man, what kind of value have you gotten out of your endeavors with Camera Shake?
Very clearly, I've learned so much. It's absolutely made me a better photographer, 100%. It's opened my mind to so many different things. I think it's made me a better person, to be honest with you, because I've had the opportunity to have so many different conversations with so many people who are so much better than I am at the thing that they do, right? And so it's been an incredible learning experience for me. And I always say this when people ask me this, it's like, 'cause you get this question, why are you doing this? If it's not for money, why are you doing this, right? And my answer is always quite simple. Just imagine this, some of the best photographers on the planet give me a couple of hours of their time to ask them anything I want to ask them. Why wouldn't I? As somebody who's interested in improving themselves and their own art and craft, why would I not take that opportunity? Do you know what I mean? It makes no sense. So, to me, what I'm saying is, to me, that's the driver. Being able to make these connections, as you said, make connections. I've made so many friends through this. Like we've met. We've met at Imaging USA, and I was there because I was producing a Camera Shake podcast episode there. So doing that has got me there. It's allowed me, it's given me opportunities to meet people, and people introduce to other people, and blah blah, and all the rest of it. It's and personally, as somebody who's had a career in music before, I have to say, the photography as an industry is actually, in a weird way, much more open and welcoming than the music industry is in general. That's counterintuitive, but I've found that to be true for sure.
You mentioned the photographers, right? That's one thing that blows my mind sometimes, that for many years before, imaging was my very first expo, first ever. And I said, I'm going to go check it out because I thought maybe this is just a waste of money going to these things. And I was happily surprised. But I remember following all these different photographers like a John Gress, Peter Hurley, Lindsay Adler, the people you follow overall. And then you fast forward, and many of these people have been on my show. Like you said, they give you time to ask them whatever they want. And you get to talk about things that could be literally anything, like World War II documentary from Canada with John Gress. Like that has nothing to do. It has nothing to do with photography, but getting to understand the person behind the camera, the art, and etc. And at times I had Peter Hurley help me out with a photo shoot I was doing in Shutterfest, because he's like, yeah, I'll give you a hand. I got nothing else to do. It's just mind blowing what was before someone that I was emulating their work and understanding, learning from their things, and that to now people that are on my phone and you get to talk to them. And the only way it happened is because you put yourself in a vulnerable situation, you create a podcast, and you stay with it. And I think the rewards in that case come through, but in a different way. It's not necessarily the money. It could be the money down the road. As long as eventually I break even with the show, I'll be so happy. I'll be like, this is perfect. Any money that comes after that, perfect. But then again, I'm doing it for a different reason than just for the money. And
well, that's it. I mean, people have people have hobbies, right? And they get involved in a hobby for a variety of reasons. Very rarely it's making money, So, somebody might, I don't know, might join a football club or something after work, and go and train a couple times. The reason that is not to monetize it, to make money. Nobody's ever going to go, well, I see you play football or soccer, as it is, I see you play soccer like twice a week. How much money does that make you? Nobody ever asks that question because it's accepted that you do things like that not for monetary gain. Because the actual benefit of that is fitness, social aspects, like you meet your friends, stuff like that. When it comes to things like podcasts, for example, or YouTube channels or something, there's the automatic association with money there, right? Oh, well,
Right.
clearly he must be doing that every week or something because it makes him money. Why? Like, d- it's this is the one single question that I get asked uh, more often than anything else is like, how do you do that every week? Like, how do you do that whilst having a job, whilst having a family, and also, as I like to say, I like to stay married. You know, so how do you do that on top of all that children and all that kind of stuff every week? And the answer is very simple. I've cut out um, I've cut out things in my life that are total time wasters, right? I call it time sucks. So
Yeah.
your time sucks could be something like TV, for example, right? So my example is always like, well, if you come home after work, like a regular person, and you finish at 5 o'clock or whatever, you come home, maybe you make dinner, then you sit down, you watch a couple of hours of TV, maybe your favorite TV show or a movie or the news or whatever. Okay, and then cool, and then you go to bed and do whatever else it is that you do. If you do that every day, over the course of a week, that's 14 hours. Like if I just cut out that one thing, I can make several of these episodes a week. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just finding the things that suck our time. Um, and I'm not saying I never watch TV. Of course that's nonsense. I have favorite shows and I watch movies and mainly Star Wars related things, but um, but to me, I just don't mindlessly have the TV on and zap through different shows and like, and watch everything that everybody else. But I just don't do that because I'm not interested. What I'm interested in is making a show like this. And so I'll do it. That's basically it.
Yeah, no, the time sucks are a big one. I was thinking to myself, like, how 2.5 years ago, what did I do? What was I doing besides what I'm doing now? And there were some video games there, TV shows. I don't really watch TV, but there's plenty of shows to watch out there and keep you occupied. And yeah, Star Wars being one of them. Like, for example, I tend to keep fairly busy, but when Andor came out, I was a big Rogue One. Like I was like, that's cinema right there. That is exactly what you want. It's exactly what's happening at the end because you got to see Star Wars Episode 4.
Hmm.
So how this is all kind of play out. But they still told a beautiful story regardless. And when the show came out, season 1 was great. Season 2, my God. It was such a refreshing thing to see filmmakers tell a story again. And it didn't have lightsabers, it didn't have this, and didn't have the Sith. It was literally just great storytelling. It's like, what happens when you're trying to build a rebellion in a government that obviously doesn't want that happening? And yeah, that took a little bit of time. Every time Andor came out, I might have watched it probably 2 times over. But outside of that, yeah, you're absolutely right. You have to, if you really want to do this, or anything. It doesn't have to be a podcast. It could be if you want to start a photo business or maybe you want to start some other business. You got to analyze what's taking your time. Is it worth it? And before you realize it, that 1 hour or 2 hours a week translates to 14 hours that you could be putting elsewhere. Hell, you can use those 14 hours to go play soccer with your kid or play baseball or anything.
Yeah,
Literally anything. It just requires discipline.
exactly. And this is the thing, coming back to the beginning of this conversation, you're talking about personal projects. It's exactly the same principle. You could take, in this case, a podcast like this as you could view that as a personal project. But, if you're listening to this and you think, oh, wow, I have no time to start a personal project at all. Well, just think of the things that suck out your time. and eliminate some of them. Video games are a huge one. And I know it's enjoyable to like sit down and zone out and play a game. But it's also a massive time suck.
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember the days when I used to play video games, probably a long time ago. But, I know like more often than not, you sit down, you know, it's 10 o'clock in the morning. Before you know it, it's 6 o'clock in the evening. And you go, what happened? What happened
You,
was I moved from level 8 to level 37. That's what happened. In
you
that
probably
time.
didn't eat. You probably didn't eat halfway through. So it's interesting. It really is interesting because even with like my son, I'll play with him sometimes. Right, he's 14 now, but from time to time he'll like, oh, let's play, let's play, let's play. And I'm like, I can play from this time to this time because I was never the organized guy. It wasn't up until like 3 years ago, 2 years ago that I started to little by little organize myself. In the last year, my calendar's itemized. It's the only way that you can make time because it's not comfortable sometimes to have to do the work that goes behind the scenes. I'll give you a great example, right? Here's an interesting behind the scenes on the Outspoken Artist Podcast. I recently, earlier this year, for my imaging episodes, I outsourced my editing to a team in India. They did a great job. Took some back and forth to figure it out. But then on my second round, when I went to Shutterfest recently, I was going to have them edit because it saves me time. I'm like, okay, I can allocate some funds that I would have otherwise spent here to save me the hours to edit. Well, they increased their price substantially for the next edit. I'm like, I can't do this. So now, with everything that I have going on and all my plans and everything else, now I have to edit all these episodes because different would it be if it was just one, but I have 15 episodes to edit, Kirsten. 15 different episodes. And I got to make time for them. So something's going to get sacrificed. Something that I like to do is going to have to be put aside for a little bit so I can get these done. So if you're looking to do something, you just got to commit because it's the good stuff. It's not easy sometimes.
Yeah, but that's the thing, it's commitment. So, I mean, commitment is like, it's a thing that I think people tend to forget about sometimes. Commitment is important when you just simply want to improve or get better at something, no matter whether it's, getting better at studio lighting, for example. You're not going to get it. You can watch any YouTube video there is. You can read books, you can do online courses. You can do all these things unless you actually get behind the camera, get yourself a couple of lights and start shooting and committing that time. You're never going to get any better at studio lighting. It's, because creating a good looking portrait, the lighting is only one aspect of all these things that you don't pick up from a screen. There's things like communicating with the model, posing, blah, 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 creating an atmosphere. All of these things together combined, create that final result.
Right.
And I know through my own history that, the better I've gotten in communicating with the model, for example, the better my portraits have gotten. It's really as simple as that. The lighting side of it is not even necessarily that hard once you get the hang of it. It's everything else, that's because if you photograph an expressionless face, you can light that as well as you want. It's always just going to be an expressionless face.
Very true.
That's ultimately that. So, and the only way you get better at stuff like that is just, commitment. And maybe sometimes sacrificing other things. What I've found is that rather than sacrificing things, I've realized, over time that cutting out some of these things, it's not been a sacrifice. Actually, it's been a freeing experience. It's almost like, taking off the shackles of modern life to a degree, because it's sort of, it's allowed me to see things from a different perspective. Because when you're in that daily grind and you're in that rat run, you can go, oh yeah, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, mainly because everybody else is doing it and you just think that's kind of thing that I have to do, you just can't you're so involved in that you can't step outside of that and get a wide angle view. You know, um, like you can't get that 14 millimeters, super wide angle view of your life because you're so stuck in the nitty gritty detail of it all the time. And it's sort of it's easy to say that in many ways. It's much harder to actually do it. I realize that, but it's a very powerful thing.
It is. It is. I think the rewards are there. It's just not what people think. I think it varies from people to people, because just putting yourself out there and making yourself vulnerable and being okay with that in itself, as a human being, where you can put yourself out there and not really give a crap about what people think, that in itself has value 120%. Because I was never in front of the camera kind of guy. I was always in the back, production. Even when I used to do short films in my university, it was just director of photography, producer, editor, always behind, because I was terrified. I was terrified of being in front of the camera. But people don't really care. And the ones that are saying anything derogatory, they're idiots. Don't listen to them. That's really it.
Absolutely. Well, this is the thing. Like, I don't know. I mean, I had this conversation with my wife a little while ago. So my wife started a Zumba business, right? The Zumba fitness, dance related stuff. And in the beginning, her thinking was, oh, well, but I'm going to have to promote it on social media. I don't really feel like I want to put myself out there on social media, because what if? So and I said, like, well, why not? Because it's an easy way to promote something like that, especially locally, She's like, oh, well, what if people leave negative comments? It's like, so what? It's, people can leave as many negative comments as they want. If you've got a full Zumba class week after week after week, you're laughing all the way to the back.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's about, like, focusing on what the reasons are. And the truth of it is, I mean, I'll be honest, as far as the Camera Shake podcast is concerned, I've had a few negative comments over the years, over 5 years, but not many. You can probably count them on one hand. But whenever I get, a negative comment, I do look at it and I think, is that person right? I remember one episode, I can't remember exactly which episode it was, but I remember a couple of years ago something, I have a comment saying, oh, yeah, the presenter keeps, I was trying to watch it, but the presenter keeps talking over the guests all the time. So I thought, well, is that true? Because it could be. I'm not saying I'm perfect. So,
Right.
I went back and I rewatched the episode, and there were a couple, it actually wasn't permanent, but there were a couple of occasions where I realized that's what I did. So really, that comment has pointed something out to me that's actually helped me to hopefully do a better job in the future, because it's just made you aware of something that you weren't necessarily aware of. So these things can be useful. Sometimes negative comments come from a place of spite or jealousy or, stuff like that. And those are just they're not worth carrying around with you,
Right. It's the negative comments, right? To your wife's concern, I tell people, invite them for two reasons. One, sometimes there could be some truth to them and you can improve. And that's good. You want to improve, because you don't want to be in an echo chamber where everybody's patting you on the back, telling you you're doing great. If there's something like interrupting a guest or saying too many ums or etc., repeating the same word over and over again. I used to say wonderful or that's excellent. I don't know how many times I said excellent in this one episode. It was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous amount of excellence. It was an excellent episode. Don't get me wrong. But
yeah.
But that's number one. And number two, the algorithm loves comments regardless if it's good or bad. So exactly. At the end of the day, if they all want to put a bunch of negative comments and start a whole thread in there and it just makes it seem like the episode's being talked about, then by all means, have the conversation, say whatever you want, because the algorithm does not care. They really don't care. And for that reason, you mentioned like your wife with the Zumba and everything else. I'm teaching a class at imaging specifically on this because of the fact that it's all about how to create video content if you're afraid of being in front of the camera. Because that was me. That was literally, I was the use case. I was a use case of how do I do this? I'm terrified of the camera. I don't like how my nose looks. I don't like how this looks, or my hair, or I'm not good looking enough to be in front of camera, whatever the heck the insecurity was back then.
I have a face for radio.
Yeah. So it's a matter of giving people permission to say, you should do this because of X, Y, Z, and also making it easy because there's so many people tend to complicate themselves. I, for one, was one to complicate myself, trying to make sure that everything looked perfect, that the image looked perfect, the lighting looked perfect. But I did not focus on the one thing, which is people come to hear what you have to say or what the guest has to say. So the meat and bones of the actual content is what should be focused on. Everything else doesn't really matter. As long as you can be heard, that's number one. If you can be seen, that's a great thing too, but it doesn't have to be perfect. But most importantly, it should be you. You're your brand, right? We're talking about branding before the episode started. And what better way to take control of your brand in today's world than putting yourself in front of it? And then people can put a face to a name and a voice to that person as well. And then they can make their decision whether they want to do business with you, interact with you, follow you, or leave mean comments to you. That's literally all that's there. So I really feel there's like a little bit of a renaissance with people being able to create content so easily for them to just take the leap. And I'm hoping that at Imaging, I can at least invite one person to take that leap and do something with it, whether it's a podcast, whether it's talking about their business, whether it's improving their photography, it doesn't really matter. Just do it. It's like damn Nike logo right there.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I think it's a great thing for people's self-confidence, and self-esteem to put themselves out there and actually to do things that otherwise maybe they would have never done. So I think sometimes it's good to push yourself, to take that step in a direction that previously you would have thought like, well, no, I'm just not, I just don't feel like I can do that. And it has such a positive impact on so many other areas of your life. Once you know that you can take that leap sometimes, you can be courageous enough to put yourself out there on a video screen, on YouTube for the whole world to see and criticize, actually, because that's what you're doing. Ultimately, you're leaving yourself open to criticism. And I think the thing to realize is, people are natural. I mean, obviously, it's natural to be afraid of rejection. Nobody likes to be rejected, and there will be some people out there that will watch your YouTube channel or listen to your podcast, and they go, "I don't like that guy." And of course, you don't want to hear that. Nobody ever wants to hear that they're not being liked. In a sense, it's quite natural. I think the reality of the world is, though, that not everybody likes you in real life. You have some people who are really good friends and some people who can't stand you. This is just normal, And so in many ways, the online world is just sort of an enhanced version of normality in many ways, in that respect anyway. And so, so it does take some oomph to basically stand up to people who don't like you and basically say, you know what, you might not like me, but I really don't care. It's the truth. You get that self-confidence really by doing things like this, by taking that leap. And that's, so it's a really great way that you can build your self-confidence, one step at a time.
Oh yeah. I couldn't agree more on that one. And I'm curious because I've done this. I do this all the time now. Do you find yourself talking to people, but then because you interview people so often, you start to take the conversation into interview mode and you let them do most of the talking? Do you find yourself doing that?
Yeah, I mean, yes, yeah, you do. And so the interesting thing about that is that, of course, when you do a lot of interviews like this, you learn quite naturally about interviewing people. And actually what you're doing is you're having a conversation with somebody. So it really makes you a better conversationalist,
Right.
in many ways. Um, and the one thing that I've learned, and that I preface this by saying, I didn't go to media school. Like I certainly didn't have an education in how to interview people. This is just learning by doing, and you get better over time, hopefully.
Right.
And that's the thing. I think what it has done for me, I'm naturally more of an introvert, interestingly enough. So good example, like my wife's the exact opposite. Although she's like, oh, what do they call it? She's an extrovert introvert or something like that. She's like,
Okay.
Like when we're in some social setting, she could just switch you on, and she's so good at like having conversations with people, and just like she's like totally switched on, and she has this thing where she can make people really comfortable around her, and I just don't. I've never had that, I always felt like I'm the awkward person at a party, where it's like I never really like, it's a good as a guy, like you have like a really good looking, lady coming up to you. I'm the guy who doesn't know what to say, like, do you like cornflakes? That would be my pickup line. But but I think that doing these podcasts like this or interviewing people, it's definitely made me a better conversationalist in situations like that, because you put the other person in the center of your attention.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting too because of the fact that as you start to conversate with different people through the shows and everything else or in life, you start to notice when people cut other people off. You start to I find myself talking to people and just listening. Something that because I have to listen. If I don't listen to what my guest is saying and I'm just listening to respond, I'm a pretty crappy person, to be interviewing someone. You should be listening to what they're saying and responding to what they're saying, not what you want to tell them. So I'll find myself in a social setting and I'm talking to people, and you quickly start to see where other folks start jumping and bumping into people's conversations or butting in or cutting them off. And you're like, man, that is rude. Let the person finish their thought for crying out loud, because that used to be me. I used to be totally guilty of that. I'm going to jump in there and tell you what I think without you even asking if you cared about my opinion. And I think that's been a plus of all of this, is being able to not necessarily make it about you, but just listen to see what they have to say, because you might be surprised. And by golly, you might actually learn something about the person if you just listen to what they have to say.
Let's talk a little bit about your podcast, The Outspoken Artist. Give me sort of like a helicopter view of what the central premise is of The Outspoken Artist.
It's interesting. I've said interesting like 4 times already, so I'm already catching myself using that word more than once. I know. The podcast has evolved from when I started to now, as it should. I initially started very structured. My goal was to interview different artists, and I say artists because art could be literally anything. It could be photography, it could be dance, it could be people that make structures. It really could be anything. Art is art. And it stemmed from the fact that I met people at imaging that I thought were really neat. And it surprised me that this person that I used to idolize turned out to be just a regular individual. And that level setting, that ground setting perspective made me want to just convey that to other people. It made me have to get uncomfortable to show people that, hey, some of these people that you have come across online or etc. are just people. And they themselves have a lot of work behind the scenes to be able to do what you see as the end result. And I'm intrigued about the people, the person behind the art. And that's been my focus lately on the podcast, is trying to understand the person behind the art, trying to have a conversation more so than anything. And lately, I think what I've come to realize is that I'm that lunatic that goes to the expos and conferences and sets up an entire studio to interview people on the go, which means I have to travel with gear. I have to travel with all kinds of different things. And that in itself is a challenging thing, kind of like underwater photography is, where I'm intentionally putting like shackles and weights on myself to make it more complicated for me to create something because it's a challenge. And with every iteration that I go to an expo, like I'm going to Build Expo, I believe, in New York next month, and then going to the Bokeh Summit in July, every single one of those has a slightly improved travel kit for me to pull off what I'm trying to pull off. Because at some point, I would love for people to do this themselves too. Because why not? Like, if you're willing to be a lunatic and go out there and talk to people, whether it's art, whether it's sport, whether it's whatever, maybe I can help you. Maybe you can see the lunacy of what I'm doing. And if you have a question, reach out. But that's my thing right now, Kirsten. It's just, I like talking to people, getting to know people, and keeping it as organic and as raw as possible, so people get to know the person as well.
Wouldn't it be cool if you could do all that traveling just with an iPhone?
I could. I totally could, but I don't want to. Like, it's funny. You can't see it over here off screen, but I have my Pocket 3 rig. So I have a rig that is designed for the Pocket 3 that I'm taking to New York. And the Pocket 3, I have it so you can actually use, hold on. Like, it's the Pocket 3, but with a podcast setup. So I'm running the audio that I would otherwise on my normal setup all through a Pocket 3 because it's a very powerful little camera. I could also do it off a phone as well because I can connect microphones there using little lapel mics. So it's trying to challenge my way into how can I make it portable enough but functional? And then how can I make it super unnecessarily complicated but very simple at the same time? I don't know, man. That's my brain. That's what I like to challenge myself with because it's like a problem to solve. Because out there are people like me going on YouTube trying to figure out how can I do X, Y, Z, and there isn't anything out there to do the insanity of what I'm trying to do. And why not do it?
Yeah, and I mean the reality is like for a number of these problems, what you'll find is if you go to YouTube, you'll find like 5 different people telling you 5 different things, and this is
Right.
ultimately you're going to have to find out what works for you. Like the lapel mic thing that you mentioned is a good example. There's lots of manufacturers that make little sets of lapel mics. Rode being one, Shure does them now. I mean, it's endless. And of course, it seems like a good idea. You've got 2 lapel mics. So if you're interviewing somebody else, you pop one mic on them, one mic on yourself. You start talking. Bob's your uncle.
Yeah.
Right. What I found though is just that process of miking somebody up, making sure it's running, blah, blah, making sure you get a level, all that kind of stuff. Although that's easy to do, when you're doing this like tons of times every day, and everybody's in a hurry, like at an expo like that, I've actually found it much, much, much easier just to do the roving reporter thing where you just have one mic and you just interview somebody in the traditional way. So much easier. Also, I don't have to edit 2 audio tracks afterwards. Do you know what I mean? It's actually, to me, it makes, for me personally, it makes more sense because I just have a tripod and a camera and a microphone and off I go. That's basically it.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I was thinking to myself, how can I have the lapel mics? So I don't have to use a handheld microphone. How can I have the lapel mics and run them through to then have the actual headphones? Because you remember in imaging, it was so loud. But the moment you put the headphones, you can have more of a personable conversation. It's like, so how can I have this personal conversation with someone using lapel mics, a DJI Pocket 3, and also run it through my audio interface so we can do the headset? So I figured it out. Is it going to work? I hope it does. There is a little bit of, if you're too close to the microphone, it creates almost like a minor echo. It
Right.
bugs someone like me. It didn't bug my wife. My wife is like, this sounds fine. I'm like, this is bugging me because I can hear the audio difference because I'm used to listening to audio. But the recording itself works. But yeah, man, that's just finding clever ways to try to replicate what I do on the go. Because if I can travel with less weight, my back and my body would appreciate it because
Yeah.
it's heavy, man. It's a lot of gear.
That's it. I remember having this conversation, a similar conversation with Steve Brazel just before Imaging USA last time. And we were talking, and he goes like, "Oh, what are you doing? Like, what gear are you taking?" And it's like, "Well, I take a camera and a gimbal and stuff." And he's like, "Why don't you just use an iPhone? Or you can do all of that on an iPhone." And it's just like you just said. I just thought, yeah, I probably could, but I just don't want to do that. So so off I go with a tripod, a Ronin gimbal, and a Nikon Z8 with like a 24 to 70 lens on it. And I drag that first of all, I have to drag all that gear onto the plane, to the hotel, to the export floor. And then I've got to drag this stuff around with me all day long, you know? And yeah, it's a lot of stuff to carry around all the time. But actually, I enjoy the process. So that's cool. Um, and the output that I have, I sort of think that it actually saves me time in the edit later on, because the files are better, there's more dynamic range, blah, blah, blah. It's not, I didn't have to color anything. It looked fine just straight out of the camera. So actually it made my life relatively easy once I had all the footage, and I've learned a couple of things actually, as you said, every time you go through this process, you just fine tune it a little bit. You're like, "Oh, this worked, this didn't work. I've got to find a different solution for that." And that always surprises, that you didn't anticipate. Like something happens and you go, "Oh, never thought that could happen, but it just did."
Yeah. Yeah. No, sometimes you simplify so much that you forget to do simple things like just pressing record. That happened to me too. It's,
Yeah.
it's like, oh my God, how could I have missed that? So again, just when you think that you got it all nailed down, now you got to go back to basics sometimes. And I'm also trying to build it because I want to, in the future, we'll love to have some help. I don't know when the heck that'll happen, but if I need to teach this to someone, it's got to be simple. It's like headshot photography. You build your system, and if you ever want to step out of your business and have someone else help you out, you got to be able to show them a simple way to do this. And if I'm trying to show someone who may not be so savvy when it comes to the film side of things or filmmaking side, I got to make the process literally dummy proof. Press here, and this is how you know it's working, because I need to be able to make it simple for myself, because as one person, being the host, being the person making sure it's recording, making sure the audio is recording, and since I do have separate audio tracks, I have to clap so they can all line up at the end.
Yeah.
It's the more complicated I make it, the more likely it is that I'm going to make a mistake. That's that's the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing, like you just said it, if you're syncing to like two audio tracks, for example, you got to clap. Like the chance of me forgetting to do that clap is extremely high. Just do that one now, just so I don't forget later. But, so to me, it's like, well, I can get around that problem if I can find a way that I can record the audio straight to camera. And then I have a system in place after the fact that basically enhances the audio to the degree where it sounds awesome. That way, I don't have to worry about syncing anything because it's automatically synced because it's recording it straight to camera.
Right.
And I don't have to worry about any of that. And if I forget to clap, well, it's not the end of the world because it actually doesn't matter anyhow. So and I'll tell you something. When Nick and I started the podcast with a friend of mine, Nick, and when we first started at the beginning of the pandemic, it was all about, okay, how do we do this? How does this work? We have no idea. We try this, we try that. And then because we were doing it remotely to start with, and then when the pandemic sort of came to a close, or when things lightened up a little bit, we could be in the same room. So we then started being in the same room, and then, the next thought was like, oh, how can we make this look better? And it was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we had a wide angle shot, and then, a camera on you, camera on me. So now we're talking a 3-camera setup. And then, okay, so, but then we also wanted to look good. So, okay, well, we can use lights. And we need a background light. Oh, we need a hair light. Oh, we need this, this, and this. And before you know it, I think it was 7 lights on this thing, right? So that was just the two of us sitting at a table. 3 cameras, 7 lights. Not only did it take a lot of time to set up, but also afterwards, the edits, now you've got to sync, 3 cameras and 2
Yeah.
audio tracks and blah, 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 blah. It just got to the point where, I don't know how many episodes, but maybe we made 20, 30 episodes like that. And it really then, I think we sort of reached the pinnacle of how complicated we could make it. Because we did other episodes too that were a lot simpler. Like we did at the time, it was fun because it was still sort of the sort of back end of the pandemic, and there was a little more time, and we did things like where we would test a noise reduction algorithm thing, a new thing that kind of new plugin that came out. And so what we did was we put a camera on a suction thing, and Nick had a Porsche, a convertible at the time, and so we put that camera on the inside of the windscreen filming us, and we would drive down the highway for an hour and a half having a conversation with the top down of the convertible in full blast. And the idea was, well, we're going to use this plugin on this audio, and if you can still hear the conversation that we had in that car going 70 miles an hour, then that plugin, we could definitely recommend that plugin. you know? So, but that was easy because it was literally just, we had one mic in the middle of the car, one camera there, would drive off for an hour and a half, would come back, done. But now we're sitting in our little makeshift studio, and now we're, 7 lights, 3 cameras, blah, blah, blah. And so whilst up to that point, the process had always been, what can we add to make it better, right? So we add another camera, we add another mic, we add another light. There was a point where it was like, okay, can we make this look and sound better by taking things away? Like, can we find a way that we can make this look cool and interesting, but maybe can we do it with 1 camera rather than 3? And so we found a way where we reset the whole thing, so we're now facing the camera, we're sitting next to each other rather than opposite each other, and we're having a conversation. That was 1 camera. All of a sudden, it's like, and we're watching the test footage back where we're talking to somebody on Zoom at the time. And we thought, well, actually, this looks great. And actually, the fact that when, we're talking to the guest, we're looking straight in the camera, but when we're talking to each other or we're commenting on each other, we're actually turning to each other, that works. It draws you into the conversation. It feels like you're sitting opposite the two of us at a table, do you know what I mean, when you're watching an episode and stuff like that. And so it was like, okay, this works better than what we did before, but now we can cut 2 cameras out of the whole process.
Oh yeah, and lights, all the lights too.
And lights, and it was 1 light. Well, it was 1 light and 2 background lights. It's like 2 gel backgrounds at a time, I remember. So this all of a sudden was like super easy. So it meant it didn't take half an hour to set up. It took 5 minutes to set up. It didn't take time. It didn't take hardly any time to break down. The edit was much easier. It was much quicker because you didn't have to sync 3 camera angles together and all the rest of it. Now it was just 1 camera. So it was a win-win, all the way, because it was, in a sense, less effort for a better result. And I think the trick then became like, okay, well, how can we tweak the workflow to make it better with less effort? Because inevitably what it means is that the time that you save, or even the money that you save, you can have put into other things to improve the show or the podcast in other ways.
It is. It's interesting. I think of it like Iron Man. When he built the Mark I, he started with the Mark I, and that thing was clunky, and it worked. It got the job done, and then he moved to the other ones and the other ones and the other ones. And then you start to do an analysis of like, okay, so what don't I need? What is an excess for what I'm trying to do here that I can get rid of? And I think I'm at that place right now where I'm like, okay, I've done a couple of these things on the road. What can I do to get the same, or at least close to the same result with less crap, with less effort, to the point that I can just set this here, and now I can do what I need to do? Because I have cables everywhere. And I'm like, these cables are chaotic. It needs to be contained. So you start to improve and improve and improve. And yeah, I think after a while, man, it does produce a little bit of a better, I think it produced better product at the end. And a place like imaging, it's loud. It was loud. Any conference I go to is loud. But the AI tool that I have, I know it'll do the job. That's the thing. It's like,
Yeah, exactly.
now I know I can focus on the audio, making sure that I can hear the person, they can hear me, but not have to worry that down the road, it's going to be clean. I don't have to worry about it. Is it going to be like an audio engineer? No, it's not. But do my average listeners care?
No.
No, it sounds perfectly fine. If anything, it sounds better than other YouTube videos out there or Spotify. So I think that that's fine. I'm not being, this is not a client gig. This is not anything of those. If I was being paid to produce this, then yes, there would be much more due diligence to make sure that that audio is perfect. But even then, these AI tools they're pretty good, man. They're pretty good.
100%. There's so many technologies, not only, I mean, the video editing thing was another thing that Nick used to do originally. And it's also it can be quite time consuming depending on how you do it, So I had to figure out a way to cut down on time for that. And in the beginning, for the first, I don't know, 110, 120 episodes or something, we used to record on Zoom, or maybe even more than that. But Zoom is, although it does allow you to do that, it's not the best software in terms of creating something that it basically, you have to edit everything afterwards. That's the thing. Until somebody said to me, it may have been Steve Brazel, he said, why don't you use Ecamm? And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. What is that? And it's basically, it's like sort of like Zoom on steroids. But what it does allow you to do is it allows you to basically cut something in the app or in the program, rather than having to go and then do it in post. So by the time we hang up on this call, the whole thing's pretty much cut. You do some top and tailing, but that's basically it. So I don't actually have to do the same thing that I had to do with Zoom, where I had to sit through the whole thing. And when you have an episode that's let's say an hour long, you have to rewatch and watch stuff so many times. It's going to take you 4, 5, 6 hours to edit that thing. But using something like Ecamm, you don't. It's it's much quicker. And again, it just allows you to it swings back to the consistency bit that we talked about earlier. It's when you simplify the process, it basically means that you allow yourself to be more consistent over time.
Of course, yeah. I have my own tool that I've used recently. I bounced between the main ones, right? I haven't tried Ecamm, but right now I'm on Riverside. I have a love-hate relationship with that one. It's simple, but I wish they would do better with banners. StreamYard, it's nice, it's expensive. OBS, I tried it. It's as bare bones as it gets, but you figure out what works for you, and the time saver in editing is huge. I love these types of interviews because, to your point, by the time you're done, it's practically edited, and there's not that much work except some minor tweaks here and there. So definitely something that I think it's amazing how we can be talking across the Atlantic. So normal. Like
absolutely. What? It's nuts.
It's nuts because it's 10, almost 10:30 here my time. And what time is it over there in yours?
It's 3:30 p.m.
Yeah, so it's nuts, like how far we are, yet how quickly we can have a conversation with minimal lag. Like I'm speaking and you're immediately responding, and that's
Absolutely.
what's out there nowadays. There really is very limiting. There aren't that many limiting factors to prevent people from being able to do this, just to have conversations. And I know when the podcast started just now, you were wanting to know about underwater photography and etc. And I totally derailed you and took you in a whole different.
I tell you what we'll do, guys. Actually, here's what we do. I realize that we'll do a separate episode entirely about underwater photography. How about that?
Yeah, I'll have to have content. Once I have, that'll be my homework, right? Like by the time that we do that interview, I'll have to have new content that I've created. Cool. So I can showcase. And by now I can do behind the scenes because I don't care about being in front of the camera. So I'll just put my little DJI down on the water and capture the workflow and etc. But yeah, no, I totally took your interview. took it somewhere else.
It's the way it goes, man. That's the way it goes. That's what keeps it interesting, you know. So what is your plan for the Outspoken Artist? What's your vision for that over the next year, 18 months?
Next year, I think growing my educator skills is going to be one of them. I get a fulfillment from having people have that realization moment. And just as much as a podcast has helped me grow, I feel that going down that route and helping people get motivated and hopefully push them in the direction to create content, I definitely want to do that. I want to continue to see what other events I can go to where I can interview people, not just photography. I'm probably going to go to some art shows, not art shows, like art fairs here locally, interview people that you would otherwise not think about being artists, but they are. So just branching out a little bit, but also, still interviewing photographers and et cetera. But that's my goal. My goal is to see where else I can take this thing and see if people like it or not.
And then, of course, you are going to be speaking at Imaging USA in Nashville in January,
Yes,
I believe it is.
Yeah, I'll be teaching a pre-con class on a Saturday. It'll be 3 hours, all about creating content, video content for social media. Big emphasis on taking control of your brand and practical, easy to use things such as Ecamm or Riverside, things to help you with the areas where you may not have strength. If you're not good at editing, this is what you can do, right? There's plenty of tools nowadays that can do editing for you. If you don't want to create shorts, here's what you can do. And just trying to get people to just do it. It took me 3 years to press record. And I wish I would have done it sooner, but it is what it is. That's how long it took me to do it. And sometimes people just need the permission to say, hey, just do it. Start messy. Don't worry about if it doesn't look great. Just start. Because the moment you start, the more you create content or the more you create an art, you'll start to figure out exactly what you want to be doing. Because I didn't know what I was really doing in the beginning, up until the point that I was like on episode 20 something, 30 something, that I realized, this is what the podcast is about. You don't know what you're doing up until the point that you are in the trenches for a little bit.
Dude, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Yes.
Wouldn't have been the last time, I'm pretty sure, because we've got underwater photography to talk about.
Yeah, whatever other crazy thing I'm getting myself into and whatnot. So
for sure. And of course, again, pre-con talk at Imaging USA in Nashville I think it's mid-January.
Yes.
That's awesome. I saw some stuff going up on the imaging website recently, so I think they're starting to populate it with speakers and stuff. So it's going to be super interesting. I know quite a few people who are speaking this year or next year at imaging, so I'm pretty sure it's going to be awesome. I'm definitely going to be there. That's the goal.
Awesome.
So
I'll have to interview you again because I'm bringing the show as well over there.
Oh, 100%. We'll do like a double entendre, basically. Where
there you go.
We'll do stuff.
We're both the host.
Yeah. The outspoken camera shake or something like that, we'll call it.
Yeah. Shaking the outspoken artist. Not
exactly. That's it. John, it's been absolutely awesome having you on the show. Thanks so much for being the guest on this week's Camera Shake podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Kirsten.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for today's episode. It was awesome having Jean Carlo on the show. What a brilliant conversation about creativity, branding, and everything that plays into that. It was fantastic. But before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you'll love. Check out episode 193 with Valerie Gendron if you're into photography with soul and simplicity. Trust me, it's a good one. If you enjoy the content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake to help us keep bringing you amazing episodes. It really does mean the world to us. And when I say us, I really just mean me because, it's just me. Anyway, for those of you listening on audio, did you know that there's a video version of this podcast over on YouTube? You'll get to see Jean Carlo's incredible photography and more in full Technicolor over there. Just head over to YouTube, search for Camera Shake Podcast, and you can watch all of our past episodes on there. And if you're already there, be sure to drop a comment, hit the like button, ring that bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement helps us reach more people across the globe. So that's it for today. Keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.